The Army's new supertank prototype is finally here. And it's not just the Abrams with tweaks. It's a full reset for the drone era. Why? Because stacking armor forever turns legends into logistics nightmares. M1E3 aims to slash the weight that traps you on bridges, and it's chasing a new powertrain that changes how it drinks fuel and how it shows up on sensors. Keep watching. This gets wild real fast, too. What do people even mean when they say that aren't tanks obsolete? They don't mean tanks can't fight. They mean tanks feel easier to find, easier to track, and easier to punish than ever. Cheap drones with thermal cameras, FPV drones that slam in like guided munitions, loitering weapons that just wait until something expensive moves. And once a tank gets spotted, danger doesn't come politely from the front anymore. It comes from the roof, the sides, the rear, and it stacks fast. So the real problem isn't that a tank can't win a fight. The real problem is the old mental model. Armor solves it. Doesn't survive a battlefield where the sky stays full of eyes and the enemy can cue strikes quickly. If you roll armor forward unsupported, you don't build a breakthrough machine. You build a very expensive bonfire. The tank don't die. The fantasy of the tank being the center of the universe died, and the Abrams, of all tanks, got trapped by its own legend. Because every decade, the Army did the same thing to it. Add more capability, add more sensors, add more computing, add more protection, add more cooling, add more power demand, add more boxes, add more wiring, add more just one more thing. And the Abrams stayed dominant by gaining weight like it collected battlefield debt. That sounds fine until weight stops being a number and starts being a mission killer. Because too heavy doesn't just mean a bit slower. It turns planning into a veto system, route limits, bridge limits, transport limits, recovery limits. And the moment you build your whole operational tempo around only if the route supports it, you hand the enemy something priceless: predictability. Over the last few years, Army messaging and reporting around Abrams modernization got a lot less romantic about this. It talked more openly about the platform hitting real limits as upgrades piled on. So in September 2023, the Army axed the planned M1A2 SEPv4 path and pivoted to something more radical: M1E3, a redesign that aims to claw back mobility and cut the logistics penalty instead of continuing the weight spiral. And here's the part people miss. This wasn't an emotional decision. It was an engineering confession. The Army basically signaled, at a certain point, you don't upgrade anymore. You just stack. And eventually, that stack crushes you under weight, power demand, complexity, and integration time. So instead of asking, how do we add another layer? The Army asked a nastier question: how do we rebuild the baseline so we can evolve without getting buried again? So what does the M1E3 actually try to be? Think of it less like Abrams but newer, and more like Abrams rebuilt around the drone era. And the direction keeps showing up in the same cluster: lower weight targets, a new approach to power and fuel, integrated protection, better networking, and open architecture. Basically a tank that can take upgrades without repeating the slow bloat cycle that got the Abrams into trouble in the first place. Now, here's where it gets spicy. The Army didn't just change the tank, it also tried to change the tempo. Normally, defense timelines move like glaciers. You start a program, you hold meetings, you hold more meetings about the first meetings, and then, if you're lucky, you see something real in soldiers' hands when the next decade already feels bored with you. But reporting around the program points to a faster, more iterative approach. Get hardware in front of troops earlier, learn faster, and don't wait until the end to discover what breaks. So if you're waiting for the moment where the M1E3 rolls into combat tomorrow, nope, that's not how this works. But if you're asking whether the Abrams modernization effort crossed the line into a real reset, yes, that's the point. Now let's talk about why people keep calling it a monster. First, the weight target. A huge theme tied to M1E3 is pulling the Abrams back toward roughly the 60-ton class range that multiple reports have discussed. Still a main battle tank, still heavy, but no longer drifting upward forever. That shift doesn't make the Abrams light. It makes it less of a logistics hostage. It gives commanders more usable options instead of more planning restrictions. Second, the engine problem. And the fuel problem. The Abrams has always had power. Nobody argues that. The argument always comes back to hunger. The turbine gave it serious performance, but it also built a reputation for drinking fuel like it didn't pay for it. And fuel doesn't just cost money. Fuel makes you predictable. Fuel convoys become targets. Fuel planning becomes the real battlefield. So when the Army talks about a next Abrams, the conversation keeps circling back to powertrain change, not as a green tank flex, but as a way to shrink the logistics footprint and build a better energy budget for all the electronics and sensors and defensive systems modern tanks now need. And here's the drone-era twist people forget. Today, the battlefield doesn't just kill what it can shoot, it kills what it can find. So when the Army pushes for better energy management, hybrid concepts, more efficient power, more onboard electrical generation, it chases survivability. It aims to shrink the "I glow on every sensor" problem while still feeding the systems that keep you alive. Third, signature becomes a survival stat. A modern tank crew doesn't just fight enemy armor, it fights the enemy's kill chain. Find, fix, track, target, engage, assess. If the enemy runs that chain faster than you break it, you lose, even if your armor looks amazing on a brochure. So M1E3 reporting doesn't just talk about more protection. It talks about staying harder to find, harder to classify, and harder to track long enough for a strike to land, while still powering the systems that keep it alive. And yes, that also means the Army keeps hammering the same ugly truth. The tank can't operate alone. It needs infantry to screen. It needs air defense to cut down drones. It needs electronic warfare to disrupt links and targeting. Combined arms doesn't sound glamorous, but it keeps heavy armor from turning into a burning lesson. Fourth, protection gets built in, not bolted on. Abrams variants already use active protection integration, and the US has used Trophy on Abrams in particular. But bolt-on protection always forces ugly trade-offs. You add weight, you add power demand, you jam things into layouts that were never planned for them. You accept compromises because you have no other choice. M1E3 aims to flip that logic. It aims to integrate protection into the tank's baseline architecture from the start because the threats aren't optional anymore. They're the environment, and protection doesn't just mean thicker armor now. It means layers, sensors that spot threats early, systems that defeat incoming rounds, countermeasures that confuse guidance, and a layout that keeps the crew alive when something still gets through. Fifth, the crew fight and the autoloader question. This is where tank nerds start sitting forward in their chairs. The US historically loves the four-person crew, especially the human loader, not only because humans load rounds and troubleshoot weird problems fast, but because that fourth crew member is real labor. Maintenance, security, recovery, the ugly, exhausting work tanks demand when crews run tired, muddy, and stressed. But autoloaders aren't science fiction. Lots of modern tanks use them. And the reason the M1E3 discussion keeps circling back to an autoloader isn't because it's futuristic. It's because an autoloader forces a redesign that unlocks other redesigns. It can support a shift to 3 crew. That shift can shrink turret volume. That shrink can lower the profile. That lower profile can reduce the target you present to every sensor and drone overhead. And once you rearrange the inside, you can also improve crew survivability by separating people from ammunition more effectively. Now keep this defensible. The Army hasn't promised a magic robot Abrams tomorrow. Ground autonomy stays hard. Dirt, mud, ditches, logs, broken terrain, chaos, land warfare throws edge cases at you non-stop. But the Army clearly wants more automation and lower crew workload because it wants the humans to fight the battle, not fight the machine. Sixth, the tank becomes a node, not just a gun. One of the biggest themes around M1E3 isn't bigger cannon, it's connectivity. Modern warfare punishes isolated platforms, so when the Army emphasizes modular upgrades and open systems architecture, it basically admits the tank must plug into a battlefield web. It must share data, receive data, and upgrade faster than decade-long cycles. And yes, people hear AI and imagine a robot tank commander. That's not the practical use case. The practical use case looks boring, and that's why it matters. Sensor fusion, threat prioritization, decision support, automation that reduces cognitive load so crews don't drown in feeds and alerts while drones and artillery hunt them. The crew that manages information best often survives longest. Seventh, what does it shoot? This is the section everybody wants to skip to, and it's also the section people oversell the fastest. Right now, the safest assumption says the Army sticks with an evolved 120mm solution in the near term because the US ecosystem already supports it: training, logistics, ammo handling, sustainment, everything. But the Army also keeps thinking past the near term, not because it wants a sci-fi railgun, but because it wants a baseline that can accept new effects over time instead of freezing into one forever configuration. Reporting tied to the reset connects that mindset to the broader problem. Future high-end fights will pack more sensors, more precision strike, and more ways to punish anything heavy and obvious, which pushes the Army to explore weight reduction, power changes, crew changes, and firepower growth paths inside a redesigned baseline. Eighth, why the Army keeps pushing speed. Here's the real heartbeat under the M1E3 story. The battlefield stopped waiting. Drones evolve fast, counter-drone evolves fast, jamming evolves fast, the kill chain compresses, and the Army doesn't want to spend 10 years perfecting a tank for the last war while the next war builds its toolset on a social media timeline. So Army leadership has described modernization as faster and more iterative than traditional patterns, with an emphasis on getting new variants into soldiers' hands earlier for testing and feedback. That matters because soldiers break things. Soldiers find the dumb design choices fast. Soldiers reveal what works only on paper. Soldiers show you which screens blind you at night, which layouts fall apart under stress, which maintenance steps steal hours you don't have, which great ideas fail the moment mud gets involved. If the Army gets prototypes into crews' hands earlier, it learns faster, and that's the whole point of changing the rhythm. Ninth, the boring part that decides if any of this becomes real. The factory part. You can design the best vehicle on Earth and still fail if you can't build it at scale, sustain it, and keep the industrial base alive during the transition. That's why the Army doesn't just talk about tech, it talks about production reality, supply chains, and how it keeps current Abrams work moving while it pivots to a new baseline. Because a super tank isn't real when it exists as one prototype people photograph at a test range. A super tank becomes real when it becomes a fleet and when the Army can actually sustain it under pressure. Now zoom out and the pattern gets painfully simple. A famous platform gets stretched. Upgrades pile on, weight grows, complexity grows, the battlefield shifts faster than your upgrade cycle, and eventually, you don't need another patch, you need a new baseline. That's what M1E3 is, and the monster part isn't that it turns into an invincible sci-fi brick. The monster part is the intent. A lighter Abrams, built to adapt faster, designed around the reality that drones, sensors, decoys, and electronic warfare punish anything that can evolve. So is the US Army's new super tank here? If here means it's already a finished weapon system ready to dominate tomorrow's battlefield, no. But if here means the Abrams program has entered its next era with a redesigned baseline built around modern threat realities instead of old glory stories, then yeah, it's here. And the next time someone asks, are tanks obsolete? The M1E3 answers with one blunt idea. Not if you evolve them fast enough. If breakdowns like this help you see past the headlines and into the hardware that might shape the next war, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive.